Captions! My name is Sarah and it is time for my September reading wrap-up. Overall, September was a really great reading month as far as quality is concerned. I did slow down my reading pace just a little bit after the flurry of reading that I did in July and the fair amount that I did in August, but I really enjoyed every single book that I read this month, which was a very nice change after some of the not so great books that I read in July and August. Now let us jump into the reading statistics. In the month of September, I read a grand total of 6 books for a combined 1,946 pages with an average of 324 pages per book. 5 of those books were new reads and 1 of them was a reread. 2 of those books were part of a series and 4 were standalones. When it comes to the genre breakdown, 2 of the books were fantasy, 1 was literary fiction, 1 was magical realism, 1 was a mystery thriller, and 1 was faith or theology based. For the audience, 3 of the books were written for an adult audience and 3 of the books were written for a young adult audience. When it comes to the character diversity, 1 of the books was nonfiction and therefore did not have any characters. 2 of the books had no diverse characters and 3 of the books had ethnic diversity represented in their characters. When it comes to the protagonists specifically, once again, 1 of the books was nonfiction and therefore did not have a protagonist. 2 of the books had diverse protagonists and 3 of the books did not have diverse protagonists. In regard to the setting, once again, 1 of the books was nonfiction and therefore did not have a setting. 3 of the books took place in the United Kingdom and 2 of the books took place in multiple locations, 1 of them specifically taking place in Morocco, the Czech Republic, and a fantasy realm, and the other taking place in Ghana and the United States. For the author gender, 2 of the books were written by men and 4 of them were written by women. In regard to their publication date, 1 of the books was published in the 1970s, 1 was published in the 1990s, 2 were published between 2010 and 2015, and 2 were published in 2016. And finally, for the star ratings, I told you it was a really great month. 3 of the books got 4 stars and 3 of the books got 5 stars for an average star rating of 4.5 stars. And now let us jump into the books. Up first, we have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This was my book of the month pick for the month of August, and it is a standalone mystery thriller about a journalist named Lo Blacklock who goes on the maiden voyage of an exclusive cruise ship called the Aurora. At first, everything is going just as planned, and it seems like everyone on board is in store for a lovely vacation until one night Lo wakes up in the middle of the night and hears what she believes is a body being thrown overboard. The only problem is everyone on the ship is still accounted for. From there ensues a crazy investigation as Lo tries to figure out what the heck has happened while no one else on the ship believes her. Overall, I found this to be a really fun and intriguing read. It's written from a first-person perspective, which is different than a lot of the mystery thrillers that I typically read, which are usually in third person. So you are learning everything right along with Lo as she is trying to figure out what the heck is happening. But what makes it even more interesting is that for various reasons, Lo is an unreliable narrator, and so you are not always sure if she is actually seeing what she thinks that she is seeing, which adds a whole another level of intrigue to the story. Despite the fact that she's an unreliable narrator, I still found her to be a very likable character, and the character development of all of the different people on the boat in general I felt was really solid. The writing was intriguing and well paced and fit the story very well, and the plot itself definitely had a lot of twists and turns that I was not expecting, and I for sure did not guess the ending of this book until pretty late in the game. So if you are looking for a new mystery thriller, particularly in the month of October, I would definitely recommend checking this one out. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Up next, we have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Once a year, I reread the Harry Potter books, and unlike last year where I read the entire series in the month of December, I've decided to spread this reread out just a little bit and kick things off on September 1st, Hogwarts Day, with a reread of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I absolutely love this series. Unlike a lot of people, I didn't actually read the series until 2011, but in the 5 years since, I have completely fallen in love with the characters and the world, and I really, really love this first book. It is pretty high up there on my list of favorites because there are so many wonderful moments. You see the Golden Trio become the Golden Trio. You get introduced to so many fantastic and wonderful characters, and I really love how a lot of the themes that become so important throughout the course of the series get introduced in this, like the importance of friendship and trusting each other and having each other's back and just so many other wonderful things. Some of my favorite moments in the series are in this first book, and so in case you cannot tell, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars as I always do. Up next, we have A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is a young adult magical realism book about a boy named Connor who one day has a monster show up at his back window. I really don't want to say much more than that about the plot because I really think that going into this story as blind as possible really adds to the emotional impact of the reading experience. I was a little bit nervous going into this particular book because I have read two Patrick Ness books earlier this year and both of them were a bit of a letdown, and I've heard so many incredible things about this story and I didn't want it to be too hyped and all this stuff, but it did not disappoint. The general premise of this book is pretty similar to a graphic novel that I read earlier this year, and despite the fact that that graphic novel did punch me in the feels, I felt like it would have worked so much better as an illustrated book where there was more opportunity for character development and things like that, and that is exactly what A Monster Calls is. This particular book has these absolutely gorgeous illustrations that are done by Jim Kay, who is the guy that's been illustrating the Harry Potter books, and it just adds so much to the actual reading experience. I absolutely loved having the illustrations there, and just the story in general, the character development, the writing, everything about it is beautiful and wonderful and lovely, and this book will punch you in the feels. Oh my goodness, like I sobbed in my bed for a solid like 30 to 45 minutes as I was finishing up this story, and I read it almost in one sitting. I actually started it one day and I was like, oh, I'll read like half of it tonight. And then there I was at like 1 o'clock in the morning sobbing in my bed with the book in my hands, and it's a beautiful story. It's absolutely lovely. It will stick with me for a very, very long time, and I highly, highly recommend it. In case you could not tell, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Up next we have Knowing God by J.I. Packer. So this book took me a really long time to read, not because it wasn't good, not because it wasn't interesting, but because it's just very dense, and so you have to read it at a really slow pace, and I would pick up other random books here and there, and so it took me a solid 4 months to get through this book, but I still did really, really enjoy it. As you might be able to tell from the title, this book is about knowing God. It basically goes through chapter by chapter many of the different attributes of God and the gospel and so many other things that are touched in scripture. And J.I. Packer is an incredible theologian who just really digs deep into all of the different aspects and facets of who God is. And while I really enjoyed this book, I think it's almost better as a book that you read with another person, maybe with an accountability partner or a mentor or something like that, because it gives you the opportunity to not just read this really dense stuff and have to sort of sit with it by yourself, but you can then process it with the other person who's reading the book with you. But despite the fact that it's super dense, despite the fact that it took me a really long time to get through, I did still very much enjoy it. We'll almost definitely be coming back to this at another time in the future, and I wound up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Up next we have Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. If you've been around BookTube at all this summer and you have not heard about this book, you've pretty much been living under a rock because this book has been talked about so much and the hype is so well deserved. This is Yaa Gyasi's debut novel, and it is a literary fiction, own voices family saga about two half-sisters who are from Ghana, one of whose family stays in Ghana and the other whose family is sold into slavery and taken to the United States and grows up there. And it's basically set up as a collection of short stories that follows one by one the generations in each family. And so you start with each half-sister and you get their individual stories, and from there you follow each generation starting way back in the 1700s all the way up to present day. And guys, this story is absolutely incredible. It is so beautifully written, but it's also really difficult to read at points because it is very unflinching in its discussion about a lot of the different things that happen to the Black and African American communities in the United States during the periods of slavery and the civil rights movement and things like that, but it's just absolutely incredible. I'm not normally a fan of the sort of short story type books like this, but I absolutely loved all of the characters, and I felt like even though we were dealing with these short story situations, we really got to know every single one of those characters, and there are a lot of them that I really wish I could just read entire novels about and the like. And I will actually be doing a full video review of this on Friday, so be sure to check back there for more of my extended thoughts and my specific thoughts on some of the different short story sections and the different characters that I really enjoyed. But if you cannot tell, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And finally we have Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. This is the second book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, which is, I believe, a paranormal fantasy series. I'm still pretty new to the fantasy genre, so I might have my subgenre wrong. I'm not really going to say anything about the plot because it is a sequel and I don't want to spoil that for anyone who hasn't read the first book, but I read the first book, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, a few months back, and I enjoyed the beginning of it, but I was kind of iffy about it till maybe 2/3 of the way through the book. And then it really picked up and I really started to love all of the different things and the characters and the plot and all this other stuff. And that was all wonderful from the beginning in this book. It definitely improves upon the first. I felt like the writing was tighter. It fit the story really well. The character development of everyone that we started to get to know in the first book was just tenfold even better. And I loved continuing to get to know Karou and Akiva and Zuzana and so many of the other characters that we first met in the original book. And the plot itself is getting more complex and more intriguing, and I am just really excited to see how the rest of this trilogy plays out. I will be continuing on with the final book, Dreams of God and Monsters, probably in October, and when I finish that I will do a full series review, but I just really enjoyed this one. I wound up giving this 4 out of 5 stars, and if you are a fan of paranormal fantasy, I think it's paranormal fantasy, please tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's paranormal fantasy. But if you're a fan of fantasy in general, then you should definitely check this one out. Well, there you have it, friends. That is my September reading wrap up. If you have read any of these books, I would love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know in the comments below, and please let me know what your favorite read from the month of September was. If you want to follow me elsewhere online, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads, all at Sarah Ann Hayes. The links for those profiles will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye! Every single book. Overall, translating. This is the second book in the Daughter of Snow and Bone.